All right, your theme sheet that we had from yesterday. Right now, the only one that we have listed on there would be transformation. And I think, Luke, maybe you were the one saying dehumanization was the theme that you figured you'd be going into detail about. It was either that one or alienation, I think. I would say for struggle for personal identity, we could do a few more things at this point that we've already mentioned with personal identity. And one of those... This is weird. One of those being uniform. Well, I try to figure out how we can get this thing lined up. I think the uniform you could put on there because reason being, you have the uniforms comes for work. You also have the uniform from military, and you do get a little bit of a different identity with each one of those things. So the struggle for personal identity, I would say the uniforms could be one of those. You could probably also throw the hospital in there so far as struggle for personal identity, because issues so far as health and how well he's feeling and whatnot. So those would be some places that you could certainly still build up personal identity. The transformation could absolutely go for any of them, which we already had there for personal identity, but I would say any of the four themes you could absolutely put transformation at. So rules, expectations of society, we didn't put his transformation, but you could certainly put it there. And rules, expectations, we mentioned the alarm clock. I'd say also his job that he has as that traveling salesman would be one that he could certainly do. So I don't want you to think that you have to stay away from this one because we didn't have as many on there. I just think we just didn't mention them quite yet at that point. All right. How about milk that Gregor can no longer stomach? Who gives him his milk? Sister, Greta, Tommy, what were you going to say? Okay. For uniforms? End of the period we were touching on, so we can bring it back up here. We mentioned two uniforms that he had, or that got mentioned in the story. Dad's uniform, which shows the change that he has had and who's in charge. Change so far as the job that he has. Also, there's mention of the uniform as to who would kind of be in charge. It gives you an example of kind of like authority, respect. The other uniform that gets mentioned was the photo that Gregor had, not of Gregor, not the photo that he had, but it was in the kitchen, where he's wearing his old military uniform. So at some point there was some significance, there was importance taking place, but now he's being described as a minion without backbone. Certainly doesn't seem as if he feels that he has that same significance and importance as he did before. So these two things would kind of like contradict one another or juxtapose one another, his old military uniform with now how he kind of feels as being a bug. Good?
Yep, thank you.
Any other questions for any of the symbols? Right here? Old. Looks like double D, but O-L-D. So an older picture of him. I think we mentioned yesterday how long ago it was, but it was 5 years ago of that picture. So you'd take Gregor as probably being about 26, 27 at this point. Probably a photo from when he was like 21, 22. Kafka? No, he never serves. And really, even if you weren't getting drafted kind of like the same way, you think of with Vietnam War and whatnot in Europe at that point, probably wouldn't have the health to be able to do it, just because he's kind of starting to get a little sickly at that point. All right, how about the milk that he can no longer stomach? Jillian? So yeah, it used to be absolute favorite. So now that he does not like it, there's been an obvious change that has taken place. So change in Gregor. And kind of like the same thing that we were mentioning with the hospitals where he can't see it as well. He is becoming less human, more bug-like. We don't have like the other food that is included, but what are things that now he starts to like? More so than milk that never would have before. Moldy cheese, things that he does enjoy. Scraps. The things that he does not like, milk, fresh fruit, fresh vegetables, those types of things. So you're certainly getting that change in Gregor that's kind of being signified by more than just his transformation to a bug, whether it be real or not real, but you can see less human qualities taking place. So you said struggle for personal identity could be one that we could put that under. What's up? Hold on. Beginning of part. You want to remember? 2. Part 2. Oh, you mean so far? I was going to say, we just did number 7. Depends on what you look at. Military uniform gets mentioned. Which part? Which part 1? Oh, actually, we already mentioned it here from must be from yesterday. Military uniform, part 1. Dad's uniform that I think Tyler was bringing up. That's part 2 and part 3. Part 2 and part 3 for Dad's uniform. My guess is more of you would probably go with the military uniform, kind of looking at the change that would take place as opposed to father. But father's uniform, part 2, part 3. We didn't get a chance to talk about these guys too much. Rumors and the borders. What's it mean to be a border?
To stay with someone.
Okay, so this isn't symbolic quality. This is just kind of clarification. They are renting out space. Any details that we remember about these folks?
They were,
As in how many, what looked like, all that kind of stuff. Remember how many? Physical description? Men. Is my handwriting that bad?
Yeah. Today.
You should let me write.
All 3 wear something. A couple different things. So far as whether they look.
Hey, lumberjacks.
No.
They were humans.
Not
Not military uniform, but they all look very distinguished and appropriate. So they have on things such as formal hats, like a top hat, overcoat, and physically they all have something that none of the quote-unquote men have in this room.
beard.
Mustache.
Facial hair.
So the whole idea is they are to look very distinguished.
I'm sorry, what's the first one?
First word, the.
No. Not that one.
Top hats, overcoat, beards. 3 men, all meant to look distinguished. Now, the fact that they are supposed to be distinguished, kind of like, I don't want to say upper class society because they're still getting rooms from them, so they don't have their own places. But the whole idea would be, what aspect of life do they represent? Older, bearded, not necessarily wealth, but not more about economic status, poor, middle class. But they would be, if you have 2 people coming in for a job interview, one of these guys, top hat, overcoat, distinguished looking beard, and then you have Gregor come crawling in thinking that he's a bug and eating moldy cheese, who are you going to hire? You're going to hire the guy in the top hat because they are meant to be more socially.
Acceptable.
Adam, I'm taking my time, or at least trying to.
So,
They show what would be socially acceptable or what would be socially expected of people at that time. And you could even kind of take that as a contrast to,
rules expected from society.
so far as a theme, yes. Now these guys show up, remember they were a part 3. But when it comes to rules and expectations of society, absolutely this would be the 3 borders. When they see Gregor, remember, they get completely upset by it. They start demanding money back and things like that. The whole idea as to what is socially acceptable, what do the three borders not accept? And you can't just say Gregor.
Living conditions.
Pardon? Phil? Yeah, you can go with that. Living conditions. They don't accept people who are
Bugs.
different.
Awesome.
So there is they kind of represent that judgment that people have, especially of those who are considered quote unquote different. So if you were to look at how there might be certain rules, expectations, certainly one of those things could be the way that you look, the fact that you have to have a job, structure, alarm clock. There's also kind of like a social acceptance that takes place where if, in some viewpoints, if you don't meet certain standards or certain characteristics, then you cannot be accepted. Now the hope would be 2017, that's not something that we would deal with, but certainly 1914, 1915 in Europe. And keep in mind what Kafka would be coming from. Jewish, World War I, a lot of nationalism, things of that place. People are looking for folks who are different to point them out and kind of make them a scapegoat. So that would be a very cultural issue of the time that would be taking place. And unfortunately, you could certainly argue that's still one that could take place. I think if there are certain rules or expectations of society that you're not fulfilling, you probably could also feel alienated, isolated. So I think the three borders would certainly work there as well. If you are feeling alienated or isolated, you probably are having a struggle for personal identity. Yeah, I think you could put them anywhere. I think you could put them with dehumanization. Now keep in mind, if you were to go with any of these themes, it doesn't mean you're going to hit every single symbol of those. It's you finding the three symbols that will work best so long as one's coming from part 1, part 2, part 3. So I don't want anyone to feel pressured that I have to go with a certain theme or that I have to pick any one of these particular symbols that we'd be looking at. It's what is going to absolutely work best for you. Music, and we're especially looking here at Greta's violin. When does Greta play the violin? So part-wise, that's going to be part 3. Gregor hears the music. What does he do? He comes out of his room. And then people get upset that Gregor's coming out of the room, especially three borders. Why would he come out of the room? Simplest answer?
Because he likes the song.
Likes the song. Shai, what were you saying? Likes the way she's playing music. Wants to see Greta again. You're going to go with that? Okay. So, likes music. Wants to see Greta. Adam, we okay? I think the word see looks very nice there.
Nah, average.
It's all relative.
I can read your hand, I just couldn't read that one word.
It's an arrow, not a letter.
Is that the letter Q's?
Not yet. If you can answer this question, you can. So since he likes music, wants to see Greta, comes out of the room, what could it symbolize? Alex, any ideas? I think we could even add another little part to it. Not only does he like the music, want to see Greta, you could argue that he even wants to be part of the crowd, family, group of people, all. Wants to be happy. What's another H word that we could put there? No. Don't write that in your essay. I will print it out and put it in the litter box
The litter box.
for the cat to do with as.
Mr. Kane, Mr. Snyder said you're a very brave man.
wants to be human. So it's kind of like his last little shred of humanity. Alex, you can go to the restroom. When he gets denied that humanity or him being part of the family, what then starts to take place? Everything goes downhill right after that. His death isn't too far after that. The family moving on without him isn't too far after that. So that music, you talk about music being an art form. It's a part of human expression. He wants to be part of that human group, that humanity, and he kind of starts to lose that shred of humanity when he gets denied that. So you take a look at the themes that we have, personal identity. Hey, you certainly could argue that with music, because if he's not allowed to partake in the music, you're not being viewed as being human. Therefore, that struggle for personal identity could take place. He doesn't fit with the rules, expectations of society or the family. What would be a clear example of him not fitting their criteria? Him being denied the opportunity to listen to the music. He's in his room all by himself. Maybe begins to crave some human contact, listens to the music, wants to come out, gets shut down, alienated, or isolated. If you are losing that shred of humanity that you have left, then you are being dehumanized. So music could absolutely work there. And again, remember, music is a part 3 element. So if there was an aspect of part 3 that you needed to locate, it looks like music would work for absolutely any of those.
You remember Mr. King?
What?
Mr. Snyder said you're a very bright man.
Brave man or bright man?
Right.
I'm not one to argue. He's a very brave man. I don't know why. I'm just going to say he is. And bright. Knows a lot more about geometry than I do. Apples, which part? You could argue 3 a little bit too, depending if you went with the description when the skin is growing over it. But yeah, we would say apples most likely part 2. What does it symbolize?
Apples. Dehumanization. Struggle for personal identity. Yes.
I'm sorry. So theme-wise, we could certainly argue with, probably I would say all of these, especially the 2 down at the bottom here. Zach, you were saying dehumanization? Or did you say the alienation one?
I said all.
All of them. Without saying that they symbolize the theme, because think about it, within your essay, if you use the apples or any of these, you have to explain how they prove that alienation, that isolation. What do the apples symbolize, or how do they symbolize dehumanization, alienation, that kind of stuff? What would be the connection between the 2, rather than going, well, Mr. Kane said they do? Because that's not enough. But here's where you start to explain.
Oh, yeah.
Did we write it?
Yeah, you could certainly go with dehumanization.
I guess, cause like, I don't know, whenever you're trying to like do it, like, ask for something to throw stuff.
Okay, so I think the term pest that you used was a good one. Throw things at a pest. Handwriting went down for that one.
I think when we were reading part 2, I'm pretty sure we mentioned like the Adam and Eve story,
We did.
where the apple was like the forbidden fruit, and to show like banishment of some sort.
Okay, so you said banishment.
Yeah.
Banishment by his being Gregor, by his what? Father, which could also therefore kind of be like a figure of authority. What was the A term that we used? If it's a reference to Adam and Eve story,
Oh, yes.
it would be an allusion. Don't feel pressured if you choose to write about the apples, don't feel pressure to include the Adam and Eve allusion. If you feel comfortable writing about it and it's going to make your argument better, by all means go ahead and do it. I think when you get into religious allusions and biblical examples and things like that, there's going to be a variety of comfort levels with it. So if this is something that you would want to take a look at, where apples kind of symbolize the banishment of Adam and Eve from the Garden of Eden, and God, the father authority figure, is not happy with them, this is very similar to what Gregor's father, Mr. Sampson, is doing with him, as he is banishing him from basically the rest of the family and his quote-unquote paradise, back to his dusty and junky room that he's in. You can go ahead and make that comparison. But if you feel that you're, again, writing this just because it was something that came up in class, then you probably don't want to do that. Adam's viewpoint of, hey, you would throw objects at a pest that you're trying to get rid of, you don't have to mention an Adam and Eve allusion for that symbol to still have significance to it by any means. Part 2 is primarily where you would go. Part 3, if you want to look at it as the wound that keeps getting worse, where he gets infected, and his father is the one who causes his health to go down, you could certainly include that, but I think probably part 2 is where most of us would go. The dust and junk, and some of you I know didn't get to these ones yet, depending on where you started. Talking about the dust and junk that is located in Gregor's room. And in part 3 is really when Kafka makes a big deal about kind of reinforcing it. Yes, there's probably some examples you could pull from part 2, but part 3 would be the main time that that comes out. Any ideas for symbolic quality of dust and junk in a room? Don't worry about the theme quite yet. But what about so far as away from those themes, what it could kind of tie in? Thank you. Nobody's been in there since. Okay, so it's only Gregor. He's alone. And in what kind of room would you leave dust and junk to accumulate? A room where you don't have anybody living in. You wouldn't have a person living in. So therefore, he's not being treated as a person. A person / human would not stay in such a place. So Adam, you were taking a look at dehumanization, I think was what you were going to say. Yeah, you can absolutely go with that one because he is certainly being dehumanized, that we are just going to take Adam, throw him in the storage room. He's going to live down in the basement, like by where the furnace is, all the cobwebs and things like that.
Who did you do the alienation one? Because isolation, they're just keeping them in that area.
You could throw it with the alienation. I think it would probably depend upon what other examples you're going with. If you were, and I know there were a couple situations we kind of talked about this, if you were mentioning like the locked doors, so a part 1 example, he's in a room all by himself, I wouldn't go back to the dust and junk because you're basically still saying, and he's in a room all by himself. Now you might mention that part, but I wouldn't make the focus all about it. If you were looking for, dust and junk in a part 3 area, I think with the music, with the borders, you'd have enough other things that you could certainly go with for it. Now, if you did not mention the locked doors because you wrote about the woman's picture, then yeah, maybe in part 3 it would make sense. And that, my guess is that might be one of the comments that we kind of keep an eye on as you're working through things to make sure you're not going back to the same example over and over and over again. Working backwards a little bit here, mother and sister clean out most of the furniture. In which part? Part number 2. Kind of similar to what's going on. You probably get unhappy when people come in and move your stuff around.
Loss of personal identity.
Without saying the themes, I still think you could say something loss of. I'm thinking of an I word. It'd be an E word, but yeah, entitlement would work.
Integrity.
Integrity.
What? Identity.
I was thinking independence, where you aren't able to make the decisions for yourself. You could certainly argue that it is a symbol of him being controlled by someone else. Which, when you take a look at it in that way, if you have loss of integrity, loss of independence, thematically, if you don't have independence, probably being alienated. If you're being controlled by someone else, you're probably being dehumanized. I would say if you are being controlled by someone else, there's probably certain rules or expectations within society or family that you are not meeting. And so that control kind of becomes a big part of that. Not for you.
Man.
I didn't say read it.
What was that gonna tell me? Tommy killed someone?
Tommy, did you turn into a bug?
Huh?
Did you turn into a bug?
What'd you do, Tom? Tell him.
About what?
14. Gregor attaching his hot belly to the picture. If you rub your belly, it gets warm.
He's
When's
trying
he-
to give it a kiss.
When does he attach his belly to the picture? It happens in part 2, and it's coming after number 13 because right when they start moving the furniture around, what does he do? He protects his picture. Why protect the picture?
He likes it. It's his.
So it symbolizes something kind of, again, of personal value.
I hate this story.
He wants to reassert control or ownership. You're understanding this one.
Fahrenheit 457 or whatever it is.
451.
451. The temperature at which paper burns.
Look at you. Scientific-like. So, trying to reassert his own control, ownership, maybe over family. It's something of personal value. And again, keep in mind, you got a guy who's still a bug, so he's trying to remain or keep human or some kind of shred of his humanity. So, remain human to a part. On to 15, 16 here real quick, and then we'll go back to the thematic aspects that we were looking at. The old lady's broom, or the cleaning lady's broom, is in part 3.
Showing like
But she's actually kind of like the friendliest one toward him.
Yeah.
Keep in mind, the quiz question he looked at, when he tries to attack her, she does not raise up the broom, it's a chair instead. So it's not something that she uses as a form of protection. The part that we're taking a look at here is when she finds the dead body, or she sees the body of Gregor to test to see if he's still alive. What does she do with the broom?
get
Just
away.
like pokes him with it. Now keep in mind, you're dealing with a person. If you have a person who you're not sure is alive or what the health is, some things that you might do: check pulse, take your glasses, see if there's air coming out, try to talk to him, things like that. So kind of similar to Adam, I think you were the one who said that you throw apples at a pest or something. If you were checking to see if an animal were alive or dead, you're probably not going to get down and talk to it unless it's a personal pet. But if it's some kind of pest, some kind of vermin, then you would kind of check it with a stick, poke at it with the broom. So cleaning lady checking Gregor's health proves she does not view him as human. So certainly dehumanization would be a place where you could kind of take a look at that one for it. Tommy, Luke, stay with us. We got one more.
We got a Saturday. I got a Saturday.
Letters written by the Samses. They write 3 letters, because there's 3 of them, at the end of the story. For 50,000 bonus points, they write their letters.
Mom, dad, and sister.
You just lost 50,000 points. You cannot pass this final. I heard something, but I couldn't tell what you
Get
said.
them next time, Tiger.
It is other people.
He didn't write the letters. That's your question.
No?
Themselves. No, they wrote them for Gregor. Yeah, they wrote them for Gregor.
No?
They don't. They don't
They decided, this is after Gregor has died, they decided to pass that day resting and going for a stroll. Not only had they earned this break from work, but there was no question that they really needed it. And so they sat down at the table and wrote 3 letters of apology. Mr. Samsa to his supervisor, Mrs. Samsa to her client, and Greta to her proprietor, which would also be her boss. So all 3, Mom, well, Mother, since that's the way that she's referred to, Father, and Greta, write to their employers. What are they asking for? They want a day off. Now, think of this versus the very beginning of the story. Gregor, if he doesn't show up to work, everyone's going to be flipping out. So the same rules do not apply to Gregor.
Oh, man. They really hate this.
Oh, we'll be, I'll make sure to give the essay prompt tomorrow.
Okay.
We're going to start doing some things on Friday to try to kind of get you ready for it so far as like attention grabbers and that stuff. We'll probably be finishing that off on Friday.
Okay.
The big thing though is going to be your vocab test.
Okay.
Um,
So I can take it on Monday, right? Like,
yeah, probably just because you don't have study halls or anything like that.
not take it after school.
Are you able to do it? I'd say after school would work better. Then you
Yeah.
don't lose a little bit of time on Monday.
Mondays are my good days.
Okay.